We are drowning in debt as a province. And folks, just like with your family credit card, big debt today means even bigger interest charges tomorrow.
This is the Western Roundup, a spin off show of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation podcast, where we are still fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government with a bit of Western flair. I'm joined now by my good friend Gage. He is the Prairie Director. You're back in Saskatchewan, correct?
Well, yeah, I'm back in Saskatoon. I was in Regina, so I haven't left the
Okay.
rectangle today.
So you didn't have to go over to the other place in Manitoba. You were
Yeah.
just in Regina. Okay. I'm also here with Carson Binda. He is the BC director for the CTF, also a rectangle person, but that's okay because they're the ones that actually keep things straight here in this country. Okay. If you don't mind, Gage, I'm going to throw this over to Carson for a second because he has an amazing story. And I just need to tee this up because Carson doesn't mention it often enough. This is Carson's story. Carson's the one that dug up this stuff, and boy, is it a doozy. You've got an MLA who's now a minister in BC who jetted off to Boston and blew like a ton of money while doing so. Please dish.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, Chris. So, our current finance minister, Minister Brenda Bailey, back in 2023, used a whole limo load of taxpayer cash to go on a big old junket to Boston. And it's not just me saying this trip was a junket. The minister said that. She opened her mouth and said the trip was a junket. The expense that just jumped out to me, though, Chris, when I was pouring through those Freedom of Information request files, was the $6,600 bill from a limo services company. Now, in the minister's defense, it's not like she got the stretch limousine. It was a luxury SUV that came with the chauffeur. But 6,600 bucks for a 4-day trip from this limo servicing company. Chris, this was one of the stories where, you know how sometimes we laugh at the politicians and sometimes we get really mad? This one had me mad. Our current finance minister, who, by the way, every other minister in BC has been told to work with to find savings, couldn't even find savings by taking a taxi or an Uber instead of this luxury SUV from the limo services company.
Mm-hmm. What got me, I'll let you jump in here too, Gage, was so many things. So I've been in government before, and just the answers that were coming out of her mouth when she called it a junket and defending it were just like, no, don't stop talking, apologize, quit doubling down. The best thing to do if you're in a hole is stop digging. But man, she
Mhm.
had that shovel on like overdrive. She just kept on going. Gage, what jumped out for you? Mine was the description. Was that you, Carson, that found it? I think, Gage, it was the description of, well, 007 doesn't drive himself around, and neither should you. It was apparently on the company's website where she rented this thing from.
Well, I know, Carson, you were telling me, and I'm not exactly sure where it went, but I'm pretty sure the list of locations that the minister got taken to in this SUV was also pretty peculiar and definitely maybe not all business related.
Well, ding, ding, ding there, guys. You're both absolutely right. So, Chris, let's start with the just wild description that this limo service company had. Now, it was billing itself, and I'm quoting here. I'm sure Grant can throw up a screenshot from the website, but this is a luxury service for, quote, pop culture icons who don't drive. It goes on to talk about, like, James Bond. I'm reading from the website here. Sure, 007 can drive, but when he's not dodging explosions, he's being chauffeured in absolute luxury. So like let's be clear guys, this limo service company that our finance minister chose to use when she was on a junket to Boston, again, her words not mine, it makes no like apologies or makes no mistake about the fact that this is a luxury premium service. They go on to talk about like Harvey Specter from the TV series Suits. You know, if he was real, he'd be in a JB limo. Same with Miranda Priestley, which I haven't seen it, but Rainey tells me is the main character in The Devil Wears Prada. So, like, it makes no mistake. It doesn't try to hide the fact that this is a luxury premium service. And Gage, we actually got the invoices that show the pickup and drop off locations. which I just thought was such a great piece of color and flavor to add to this story. But you're right, she was going to a shopping mall at one point. She was going to the New England Aquarium, which, in her defense, she said she wasn't going to look at fish. She was at the aquarium for a meeting, apparently. She went
With
to
the
a
fish.
number.
She was meeting with the fish?
Potentially. Like, I don't really know what else happens at an aquarium. She went to a couple different high-end steak and seafood restaurants, and that was something the journalists were pushing her on. They were saying, Minister, why did you use a taxpayer-funded limousine service to go to these fancy-dancy restaurants? You know what she said?
What?
Well, do you expect me to eat at Wendy's? I can't choose to eat at Wendy's when I'm on these trips. That is seriously how she defended herself here. The other thing she said was, "Look, everyone's making such a big deal about this limo service bill, but we didn't get the stretch limo. We got a luxury SUV." Now, my response to the minister is, "Ma'am, we don't care what the make and model of the car was. We care about that $6,600 bill that you stuck taxpayers with for this service, for this extravagant luxury worthy of 007 kind of service." So this was a story that it really ticked me off because it shows how out of touch this government is. Chris, I see you want to jump in, but then
Yeah,
circle back to me because I've got
I
another point here.
I will. I just wanted to point out that, like I kind of like knowing what make and model they're actually renting. But to your point exactly, Carson, $6,600. Like we were all going around the horn earlier this week talking about what we could rent for $6,600. I think Franco found like a McLaren or something, and like I forget what you found there, Gage. What was it, a Ferrari or
I think
something
there
you had
was I
found?
had a Lamborghini Huracan, a Rolls-Royce Wraith was one of the options, a Bentley Bentayga, all vehicles that I would be happy to be in at some point, but definitely not billing taxpayers for. Well, that's the funny part too that I found about that is like they're driving her around to all these steakhouses and stuff. When I'm traveling for work, I just go eat at the restaurant in the hotel. I
Yes.
don't.
But
This is it.
Gage, you're
This is it.
you
Go
oh,
ahead, Carson.
I was going to say, you're in the real world, right? You've got accountability. Wait, for folks at home, there's a lovely, lovely person named Mel who goes through our finances, makes sure we're being responsible. Like, you're not a politician. You can't just tap that taxpayer credit card and expect all your problems to disappear unless someone like us chooses to FOI it.
Yeah. And to your point on FOIing this, Carson, you wanted me to circle back to you. What got me, number one, great job on getting this FOI information. This is the Taxpayers Federation doing this, folks. That's why you're hearing about this. Okay. So remember to like and subscribe when you're watching this video, share it with your friends who need to know. But Carson, what got me on top of all of this is she didn't seem like chastened by this. She didn't seem like she was like, oh man, you know what? In retrospect, I shouldn't have done that. And let me see if I can cover off some of this myself or anything like that. There was no contrition from what I saw.
No, she was absolutely shameless, shameless about this. She even said she'd do it again. Not only did she see no problem with sticking taxpayers with that $6,600 limo service bill, she doubled down and said she'd do it all again. And folks, of course she would. Of course she would. This is the kind of financial mismanagement that she has shown taxpayers time and time and time again as finance minister. Chris, you were covering for me. I was out of town, but BC just got the worst ever fiscal update that this finance minister tabled. I mean, our deficit, just the deficit this year alone, was more than $600 million bigger than the one in the budget. We are drowning in debt as a province. And folks, just like with your family credit card, big debt today means even bigger interest charges tomorrow. The interest on our provincial debt's costing us $100 million each and every week. $100 million, right? This is huge amounts of money that's going straight out the door. It's not going to services that British Columbians rely on. It's not going to the hospitals with the emergency rooms closing overnight. It's not going towards tax cuts to make your life more affordable or supporting small businesses by making their life more affordable through tax cuts. All this is doing is going straight out the door. So when you have a finance minister who doesn't see a problem sticking taxpayers with a $6,600 limo service bill, it speaks to
Yeah.
the culture of waste that she doesn't even tolerate, but champions in Victoria. So, folks, when you're wondering why our government is so deep in the red, why the financial outlook for British Columbia is so grim, it's because the people at the very top, the finance minister, the premier, this is how they're choosing to spend your money.
Gross. Absolutely gross. And yeah, I was filling in for Carson because he was over in Europe with his sweetheart. So it was really nice to be able to fill in back in my home province. But having to just look at the numbers there that you're dealing with, like it truly upset me, like reading them. Like not any province is perfect, but I also obviously have a soft spot for BC because it's where I grew up. But just the lack of responsibility. Like I'll put it this way. All of us at the Taxpayers Federation, we expect every province to do their best and to balance their budgets and to make sure they're not piling on debt. Totally understood. But British Columbia, like you're literally sitting on gold mines.
Yeah.
Like you have an entire coastline of ports that you can ship stuff out to the world. Like that province should be just banging out money. Like you should be making money hand over fist in private investment. Like zero excuse to be going one nickel into debt. And then when you get language like this of, oh, I would do it all again, I bet you would. I bet you would. And I'm not surprised. I wanted to quickly do a quick visualization for people because I've been told that it helps. When you said it's $100 million a week for
That's
interest
right.
payments, okay, folks, the average cost of a home in British Columbia now, especially in the Lower Mainland, is actually $1 million. I know that sounds nuts to most of us, but it's $1 million. Walk down a neighborhood, picture 100 homes, 100 homes, burn them down every week. Gone, gone, gone. That's what you're spending on interest payments. It's This is why it was upsetting. It's brutal. Last word to you, Carson, on this topic. Where do we go from here? Like, what's the next thing? Is she just gonna skate on this?
Oh, Chris, we are not letting the finance minister get away with this kind of waste, but also this kind of, I do it again. What, you want me to eat at Wendy's? Absolute nonsense. It's disgusting behavior from this finance minister. So, for the folks listening to this from British Columbia, if you're on our mailing list, you probably will have already gotten an email from me with the finance minister's email address included, asking you to tell Minister Bailey what you feel about this, what you feel about her blowing 6,600 taxpayer dollars on a luxury limo service. Right? So if you're in British Columbia, you probably will have already gotten that email. If you haven't, we're working on it. Stay tuned. It'll be in your inbox shortly. But for the folks in other provinces, jump in on this too. Head online, find Brenda Bailey's email address, and tell her exactly what you think of this kind of waste. Because, folks, if it doesn't stop here, I promise you, you're going to start seeing this kind of thing in other provinces too. Well, they do it in BC. As Saskatchewan finance minister, I can get away with this. And
Yeah.
that's the last thing we want.
Amen. Great job on this, Carson. I wanted to shift gears here quickly to Gage. Gage, there's been so much work done and movement and craziness on the gun file. So at the Taxpayers Federation, we all have different directors, like where we look over certain provinces. And then we also have like certain topics that we try to focus on because otherwise everything is everywhere. 12 Gauge is living up to his nickname, and the gun file is a big one for him. He also was raised with firearms and he understands hunting and all that good stuff. He's a firearms owner. I think all of us are on this chat, which is great. Gage, what's the latest with this so-called buyback? I don't like calling it that because it's just a gun confiscation. Why are they focusing on Cape Breton as a pilot? Like, what do we do from here?
Yeah, so I mean, for the record, for the first part, I think that if your meals are being paid for by taxpayers, it's perfectly acceptable to go to Wendy's. I
Yep.
think. I think that makes a lot of sense. But when we get to the guns, basically, Ottawa has decided to do the absolute worst thing possible. It's decided to ram its head against the wall continually, despite the fact that it keeps hurting itself. So, Ottawa's gun confiscation for 5 years. It's been floundering in the shallow end, not going anywhere. They keep saying they're going to ban more guns. They say they're going to take guns at some point. They hadn't done it yet. And then they decided to finally move on it in probably the worst way after the police, the academics, law enforcement experts of otherwise, taxpayers, firearm owners, everybody said, hey, this is a dumb idea. Don't do it. They took that advice and decided to, I don't know, file it in some other area. And instead, they're going forward with the gun confiscation scheme with a pilot project in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. So what they're doing is for the next 6 weeks, they're saying we're doing a test run on taking guns from licensed firearm owners. So that's what they're doing for the next 6 weeks. There's a couple of things there that are important for firearms owners to know. The first one is that there's the amnesty in place where you can still keep your guns without being a criminal. That amnesty has been extended about until October 2026 at least. So there's no reason that you have to participate in this current pilot program, as well as we got a little bit more info into what the government's actually spending on this. So they say that they have $742 million committed to the project so far. And I think it's important to highlight that I've seen a lot of people saying that that's the budget for the program. In no way has the government been clear that that's all they're going to spend on it. They might have some cap in there for the amount of money they want to give firearms owners to confiscate their property, but nowhere have they said that they're going to make a cap on the amount of bureaucrats that are going to be involved in this, the amount they're sending to contractors that are participating, the amount they're going to spend on destroying the guns once they get them. So the bill is not going to be $742 million. It's going to be much more, and taxpayers need to know that as well when the government's rolling this out.
It's crazy. And I wanted to really stress what you said there. With it, you have another year. Okay. So if you're living in Cape Breton and you are a licensed law-abiding firearms owner and you got some kind of nasty letter in the mail saying you were going to have you comply now or whatever however it's worded, don't freak out. You have another year. Okay. So that's right out of the horse's mouth, frankly, the public safety minister. He's extended this by a year. That's one. Two, I wanted to point out quickly here, Gage, you listed taxpayers, you listed experts, you listed the police all saying, wow, this thing isn't going to work. I'd add the safety minister to that list too. He also said out loud with his face, yeah, this thing isn't going to work. And
Well,
I wouldn't do it. I've had another chance. I'm paraphrasing, but infamously, he was caught on tape talking to actually a tenant of his for some reason, just rambling on about his whole gun confiscation thing. And yeah, just I'm paraphrasing, but he said, yeah, this isn't really going to work, but we have to do it anyway because we promised some votes in Quebec. Like it was wild. So, just out of fairness, you should add the safety minister to the list of people who say this isn't going to work.
that's exactly true, and that's the craziest part because what he said in that leaked audio is what everyone else has been saying this whole time, right? He said if he was going to start over, he'd focus on illegal guns. He knows that regular firearm owners aren't the people who are causing crime, but that's what everybody's saying. But the better point on that with the minister is he doesn't know the first thing about firearms, right? He's
No.
admitted he doesn't know what a PAL is, the license that you have to get to actually legally own a firearm in Canada. So this is a guy who doesn't know anything about the firearm file, but even the limited knowledge that he has about it, he's realized that this plan is nonsense. I think that's the second thing that's important to this as well, is even people who are supportive of this sort of gun confiscation, they think they're getting guns off the streets in some sense. But the only people who are allowed to participate in this government program is people who have a firearms license and legally acquired guns. It will take exactly zero illegal guns off of the streets because it's not even within the scope of the confiscation.
No, I think that's something some folks who don't own guns don't understand. This is exactly about legal, law abiding firearms owners. Sorry to put you on the spot, but did we get the whole it's voluntary part cleared up? because like a while ago it was the weirdest thing. We had Prime Minister Mark Carney tell a podcaster, "Oh yeah, it's voluntary." And it's like, what? Like 5 years of firearms advocacy asked all at once. What? Because we wouldn't be making an issue of this if this were voluntary. You're confiscating property. Has that word been worked out? Like, what did they mean by voluntary?
No, Carney still stood up in question period and said voluntary the other day. But I think there's two things there. One, the government is playing just a shell game with words, where technically it's voluntary to go participate in the part about getting compensation, but it's not voluntary to not follow the law, according to the government, once the amnesty is broken. So there's those two parts, right? They're like, oh, we have this thing you can participate in, that's voluntary. But following the law, of course, that's not. And basically, the police chief at the minister's press conference said as much. And I think that that's part of the part that's confusing too. But it could also just be the regular scenario of you're a politician in Ottawa. You think you're so great. You know, you never think you're forcing anyone to do anything. You think your
Yeah.
ideas are so awesome that everyone is just participating them out of their good graces and not because you have some sort of force behind your words.
Everybody will willingly follow the Sun King and it'll just be
Yes.
fine. No, that's not how this works. Quickly, I wanted to point out that again, it is the police that are saying this is not going to make people safer because when I'm catching bad guys with illegal guns, they're not the ones registering their firearms and getting firearms licenses. Like these two things are not the same.
Well,
So the
Chris, we have
Toronto
a good.
police is go
Do you
ahead.
want to throw to the quick clip on that? That the
Yeah.
Toronto Police Association president recently said at a committee with Liberal MPs at it about the exact same thing. He asked the question, he laid out why no one believes in this thing, and then the Toronto Police Association president responded as such.
Yep. Here is Clayton Campbell. He is the president of the Toronto Police Association.
The federal gun ban and confiscation scheme is an absolute disaster. Police, academics, licensed gun owners, and everyday taxpayers know that targeting lawful firearm owners won't make Canadians safe. You, sir, are on record saying, quote, "We know that the gun buyback program is going to have essentially zero impact on the crime in Toronto," end of quote. The public safety minister, Gary Andasangari, certainly doesn't seem to think it'll work either. He admitted on a leaked audio recording that legal gun owners aren't causing crime and that police services likely don't have the resources to follow through on the project. Does the Toronto Police Association and your members, sir, believe that the Prime Minister should fire the Minister of Public Safety? Yes or no?
So I don't want to weigh in on who should be fired at this time, but I definitely would want to comment on the gun registry and the impacts on safety in Toronto, if that's possible.
Please.
Yeah, so I mean, the bottom line, the City of Toronto is the gun buyback program would not have any impact on the violence we're seeing in the city. The violence we're seeing in relation to firearm offenses is essentially exclusively to a small number of gang members, thugs using illegal firearms. Most of the time they come across the border. About 90% of the 700 illegal firearms we seized last year came across the border. And most of the time people on bail or are prohibited from using a firearm. And I can say in the City of Toronto, it's a very challenging thing when it comes to funding public safety. And I'm sure if you asked the Mayor of Toronto, Olivia Chow, or Chief Myron Demke of the Toronto Police Services how they could use even a fraction of the $750 million, we'd find a lot of better ways to spend that money to actually improve public safety in our great city.
So yeah, it's right there, folks. And I have to stress, police unions are really reluctant to speak out on things very often. They put up with a lot of stuff, okay? We're on the front lines all the time, okay? They see revolving door justice. They have to bite their tongues all the time. For them to come out and go to committee and say, yeah, this is not going to work, it takes a lot. So it's really good to be hearing from the unions on this. Secondly, the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, have said, yeah, we're not interested in participating in that. That is huge because they're an enormous provincial police force. I know that Premier Danielle Smith here in Alberta has said, yeah, no, we're not interested. We have other things to do with our time and resources. We're not participating. I think Scott Moe has said something similar, correct, in the Rectangle Place?
Yeah, pretty similar. He hasn't been as loud about it at the exact moment, but they passed a couple laws in the past that'll make it a lot more difficult for Ottawa to come in and try and take all the Saskatchewanians' guns. So they're a united front on that. Oh, and then there's the other police forces as well. You know, we saw the Barrie police. They said they have no current plans to help the feds. The Hamilton police were more straight up when they said it. They were just like, well, we haven't talked to them about it since 2023. So that kind of just shows how the government still has no idea what it's doing, right?
No.
They're trying to roll this out across the country in the next year, but a police force from a pretty big Ontario city is like, well, they didn't tell us.
Even just down the way from Cape Breton. So I reached out to all of them and I've got it on a little spreadsheet. You boys would both be proud of me with my spreadsheet. So I don't have an econ background, but I figured out how to use it. And so I contacted all the major police stations across Canada. And so far, some are getting back to me. Truro, which is in Nova Scotia, not far from Cape Breton, basically said, yeah, we haven't really heard anything about this either. We're going to wait and see. Like, again, it's just really showing that even though this pilot project is happening just a little ways away in Cape Breton, even in Truro, they haven't been told anything about it. Lastly, I'll leave it to both of you guys. Carson, I'll go to you first because I know you care about this issue. What's your hunch? Like, I think this is winnable because there's just so many holes in this thing. Like, so many groups are saying this is a bad idea. So many places are saying they don't want to participate. Like, do you think this thing is winnable?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And folks, like, just think about where the carbon tax fight was a year and a half, 2 years ago. We were alone, essentially, opposing the carbon tax for a long time at the CTF and taxpayers. Then we got it defeated because there were so many holes. I mean, the policy had more holes than a colander, at least the consumer carbon tax. And so we were able to push and push and push and push, and eventually everyone was on side. Seems like with this fight, that first bit's done. Everyone recognizes that this is a policy full of holes. Everyone knows that it's not going to make a difference because criminals don't care if they have their guns legally. Criminals are willing to break the law by definition. So, this policy is so full of holes. Everyone from the police to the taxpayers, I even saw a bunch of indigenous groups talking about what a bad policy this is. Everyone's united, and it seems like it's just the politicians who still think there's any hope of this going through. So, Chris, to answer your question, absolutely there's still hope. We can keep pushing, and I know at the CTF we will keep fighting. And we are going to win this thing. So, folks, sign up to our mailing list. Make sure that you're part of the taxpayer army that can respond as things are breaking. Push the politicians who need to be pushed. Head over to taxpayer.com and make sure you are on our gun petition list.
Gage, are you surprised by how many groups, like I said, including the safety minister in private, who says this thing isn't going to work? Are you hopeful that this thing is winnable?
No, I think it's definitely winnable. I think Carson laid it out greatly. Basically, everyone and their dog knows that this is a bad idea. And when you push that kind of pressure towards the politicians, it can make stuff happen. But I think also the saving grace is that as a guy, I don't know that many things. I know a couple things. But one of the things that I do know is that the government is really bad at almost everything it does. And I think that might be our saving grace here, is that everyone's going to push back against it, but also the fact that bureaucrats have no idea what they're doing on basically anything, and it's likely they'll have no idea what they're doing on this, and we can win this war simply by allowing the bureaucracy to fail at this program and not let this pilot project succeed.
Excellent. One housekeeping note for people who are in Alberta. It's day, whatever it is, how many thousand. And we actually still have an industrial carbon tax here in Alberta. I know that sounds weird, that if you walked up to somebody on the street in Canada and quizzed them and said, what is the one province that has declared itself to be a carbon tax-free zone? It's Gage's province and Carson's home province. It's the rectangle place, Saskatchewan. Thank you very much, Scott Moe has declared, yeah, we want to be carbon tax free. Thanks, but no thanks, we're not doing it. And there's a weird situation here in Alberta where there's a program called TIER, okay? The industry is going to try to say something like, oh, it's circular and there's no cost and it doesn't go out. It's just a bunch of oil companies paying credits into a pool and then they take the credits back out and blah, 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 okay? The point here is that unfortunately, we still have a provincial industrial carbon tax in Alberta. We should not. Okay? If it wasn't costing people anything, then why did Premier Danielle Smith freeze it? Okay? She's frozen it. She hasn't gotten rid of it altogether. And I'm urging her, like the Taxpayers Federation supporters, we surveyed them. They really care about this issue. They want it completely gone. And I'm telling you this for a practical purpose. And that practical reason is Prime Minister Mark Carney. Okay? He's not done with carbon taxes. He loves carbon taxes. We've all read his book, Values, which is like half about carbon taxes. And I just watched him at another little globalist muckety-muck meeting that they're holding in London for some reason that he's at. And he was asked, how's it going in Canada? He called carbon taxes a good policy and that they were a textbook good policy, but had become divisive. You know what that means? You know, that means he's going to hit us with a big ol' industrial hidden carbon tax. And he's going to create a whole bunch of carbon tax tariffs, which he mentioned again during the election. So this is a thing to Premier Danielle Smith. Do not leave the keys by the door. Okay? By having an industrial carbon tax already set up here in Alberta, you're leaving the keys by the door. Don't do that. Make the robber work for it, okay? Don't have an industrial carbon tax here in Alberta. Carson, Gage, thank you so much for your time. Folks, if you're listening to this, it's the Western Roundup, and you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about the show. Let us know what you care about most when it comes to keeping politicians honest, okay? And stopping crazy spending. Be sure to like and subscribe to this video, and most important, be sure to share this with your friends who need to know.